Hello?
Okay. Mayor, we're ready. Councilmember Leonard,
Here.
Councilmember Reed,
Here.
Councilmember Salver,
Here.
Councilmember Tricoche,
Here.
Okay, thank,
Councilmember Yaffe,
okay, roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Fuller,
Here.
Mayor Bruder.
It's here.
Okay.
Ish.
Yeah. It's the proper designation.
Stephanie, can you hear us?
Stephanie? Yeah, I think we lost.
Yay, okay, we're at number 1. I can you hear me? I'm having, Alba,
Yes,
Alba?
you're back.
Can you,
You
I'm
can
back?
go back
Okay, I guess
outside.
I have to go to the back. I'm going back outside. Okay, number 1, Marlene.
Consideration approval request by Smart Park LLC to administer commercial parking operations in the B1 Business District, specifically for the 11 spaces located in the rear of the building located at 1055 King Times Place. And Mr. Brandon Little of Smart Park is here. If you, Abba, bring him up so that he can speak for the application.
Does anybody need to hear from him since he's done other ones in the town? Or does anybody have any questions for him?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, Josh,
Hey.
go ahead.
Mr.
My,
Little.
sorry.
So
I'm sorry, what, Marlene?
just saying he needs to unmute himself so he can answer your question. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, I was waiting for everyone else to speak. You know how feedback kind of builds when there are a lot of unmuted microphones in these things.
Well,
Josh.
yeah, my only real concern here is that, you know, the design that we got, that we were, you know, the little computer image, little picture on the thing, it's going to be impossible really for any person to understand that they're in your spots versus the spots next to it. And what I'm worried about more than anything else is creating something like the trap they have in Miami Beach, where there are private lots where the signs look identical to the municipal lots and people park in one and don't realize that they didn't get verification or the validation, I should say, for parking for the other. You know, I have no problem with you guys doing the spots, but I have a real issue with the fact that I'm sure we're going to get a ton of phone calls and emails and angry people if they get towed or booted. And I understand, Kelly. Hold on a second. And simply because they look up and they saw the sign next to them, it's one that looks like it's yours or looks like it's the other one next to it, and they're one spot over. So I just want to make sure here, and I want to make sure that it's a condition of the of our approval here, that there is not going to be booting or towing on these spots.
Yeah, we don't currently intend to engage in booting or towing for purposes of enforcement. To address the concern you raised first, which is, you know, identification of signage, because the town has been involved with pay by phone for quite some time at this point, you should already be familiar with the process and how it works. So the town has pay by phone signs all over the place. They have location codes that are unique to a certain area. And the user, when they want to come park, simply pulls up the app, plugs in the correct location code, and their parking session begins. Here, because we have these 11 spaces that are all in a row in a single tight contained area, it's very easy to make sure that the signage is sufficient to show which location code applies to these spaces specifically. We'll have a sign at the parking space of either end cap with an arrow pointing inward, and then we'll have additional signs in those interim spaces, probably 2 or 3 additional signs for those other 9 spaces in between. So first and foremost, I think it would be very difficult for someone to get the wrong location code, but I agree at some point it's probably going to happen. We never start with towing and booting. We have a ticket system, which is how we enforce. The best thing about that is that it's easy to undo. We get requests all the time, appeals of tickets that have been issued, that it's as easy as could be to simply waive the ticket. And we do regularly, every time, especially if it's a first violation from anyone. Those tickets almost always get waived, and we have absolute discretion. We do contract out with a separate company for that purpose. But yeah, we have absolute discretion to be able to waive those enforcement remedies against anyone.
Are you planning on towing and booting at a later date?
Well, so what we typically do, and this is how it's always been, we start with ticket enforcement, and usually that's effective. If it's not, then we would obviously explore other options, which we don't typically boot, but we would contract a tow company, to the extent that that was necessary. Our preference, though, is the ticketing system. Yes?
I'm sorry. The question is, do you boot and do you, it's a yes and no kind of question. Do you do it or you don't do it? Are you planning on doing it in the future or not?
Well, that's two questions. So the first question is no, we do not we do not tow or boot at any location right now.
Okay, so
And the second question was, do we in the future? I don't know. If it becomes necessary because ticketing enforcement isn't working, obviously parking needs to be enforced. It's private property, and if people aren't supposed to be parking there, then they get towed away.
Frank, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Is there anything in our code that can, or anything in this contract that we can put in where they cannot tow and boot? They can just write tickets?
we can make our approval conditional.
Okay,
You could,
okay.
but I'll tell you, many years ago in North Bay Village, I dealt with an issue similar to this, and the condition was having the sign at each and every parking space, for which it was somewhat similar, but it was a different company, and it was an actual ticket. And so they required in that instance, to make sure there was no confusion, that there was a sign on each of the parking spaces identifying what system that was, because it was a private area that wasn't well defined. So perhaps one of the conditions, if you chose to do that, would be also to include a sign at each of the parking spaces to clearly identify who the parking fees go to.
Okay.
I have a few questions.
I think that the specific question was, and we've done this before, when we issue the BTR, and we condition it upon not towing and not booting.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we had the same issue sort of at Bank of America.
Correct. And I don't want to get into that again with towing and booting.
Yeah, I have a few other questions. What is the process for issuing a ticket? Because you're not a government entity, so how do you issue a ticket since you're a private company?
We don't issue tickets. We contract out to a company that specifically does that. And they don't need to be a government entity to essentially assert a claim for what I believe amounts to a trespass. So that's essentially how it's framed. And they take care of everything in much the same way that the service we provide to the property owners that we contract with is essentially, we take care of all of the revenue collection, distribution, the system maintenance, the signage, and all they have to do is sit back and get a check at the end of the month, which is very favorable and advantageous to the property owners with whom we work.
How much is charged for the
Our
ticket?
enforcement company does the same. Pardon?
How much is the ticket?
I believe it's $30.
And how much are you going to charge for the spots? Like, is it hourly, every 15 minutes? How's that going to?
So we charge on an hourly basis. It's typically between $2 and $3 an hour, depending on what those market conditions are. I assume because of the fact that people have been using the system to park here for quite some time, that the fees would simply be the same.
And then I have a question for staff. For this specific property, did we pay the property taxes for this current fiscal year?
The tax bills don't even go out till November.
I'm talking about for the current fiscal year, which is would have been last November, Marlene.
Last November, yes, we were under contract last year.
So we paid the taxes for the property.
So I'm assuming we're going to get back a portion of it because they still have a couple months.
Let me interrupt in reference to Jordan's question. I think we pay
Arrears.
property taxes in arrears.
Yes, we pay in arrears.
Right. So what we paid in last November, related to 2019. What we paid this November relates to 2020.
Right.
But I have a question.
Yes.
If I can, Stephanie.
Absolutely.
Do we impose a no-tow restriction on other parking facilities around town? Because it would appear to me, if we said no booting, no towing, specifically targeting this particular property, I would think we're kind of overreaching and not applying the ordinances fairly to all parking facilities within the borders of the town. I'm just putting it out there for the attorney to respond to.
Well, Isaac, I can answer that question. There are no other facilities like this in the town. This will be the first commercial operation where they will be collecting. There's other property owners that have parking lots for the customers, but this will be the first of this kind.
So why would we treat this one differently than just a parking spaces that are owned privately that can tow or boot or do whatever they want?
Because, like, for instance, Isaac, Bank of America is a parking lot, but they're not metered and they're not charging, and that's a private parking lot. This is butt up against other parking.
This is a business. This is different. This is a business, and at the same time, in my mindset, it's deceptive to a lot of. And look, I mean, I understand the landlord wants to do this, and I don't have a problem with it. But the way it's going to be set up is going to be deceptive to a lot of people because the spots go right up against the ones next to them. And I'm sure all of us at some point have gotten out of our car. We look around trying to find where's the sign that shows the code, and you look for the sign that's next to you or closest to you. But here you could have one that you could be parking almost right next to one of those signs. Look up, see that, put that code in, and meanwhile you're in somebody else's spot. So it's going to create confusion here. And when we talk about what we've done in the past, Isaac, just so you're aware, I mean, just to remind you, when we had the conversation with Bank of America, one of the issues was that they wanted to start booting. And we came to the determination that we were not going to allow them to boot unless they were going to have somebody there, or at least some office where someone could go ahead and pay the fine 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so that you don't have somebody who gets booted and then doesn't have their car starting 5 o'clock on a Friday and can't get it in until Monday if the office doesn't open to that point. Towing's towing. They can go to a tow lot and pick it up. But we didn't find it fair to have somebody be locked out of their car indefinitely.
Right.
So the problem here is it's a business.
I'd like to say something if
I get the booting part, but I think the towing part, I think we should back off on the towing part. I get the booting part.
So I'd like to say something if I could. And I don't have a problem with a private company taking this over. I'm one of the council members. There's 3 of us right now who sit on block 11. And I know we're going to be talking, at some point about the mathematics and the finances associated with the parking. So I'm fine with a private company taking this over. I'll tell you right now, though, my issue is a component that we keep talking about, which is what the average citizen does. I get out of my car, I look for the closest number, and I plop it in. I mean, I don't assume that it only goes to 11 spaces. And so, for me, we're talking about revenue, we're talking about COVID-19, we're talking about revenue impacts. And I think what's going to wind up happening is that not only are you going to have people getting towed and getting, having all these other issues and getting ticketed, but you're going to have revenue going to one place when it should go to another. And so what I'd like to see, and what will be a condition of my vote, is I think every single one of those spaces, and we may have to look as a town, is marking those specific spaces that is only for those spaces and that this is the number for those spaces, and then putting on the spaces around it what those numbers are, like putting a little plaque or something and having it stay there so that it's very clear for whoever pulls in.
I agree with
with-
Elizabeth that those parking spots have to have in front of each one of them the number and the ID so that it's very clear that those 11 spots are different from the towns.
But I think the surrounding spots should have the correct code on those as well.
But so what you're gonna have then,
We can't.
so what
force
you're gonna
the
have then, you might as well
property.
just, put a sign up in front of every single parking spot out there in block 11, so everybody will know. I mean, you're gonna have sign proliferation out there, and I'm not aware of any other private parking areas where we let them put a sign in every single parking spot. I think that came up a number of years ago with respect to another lot. I mean, the whole back issue there is just going to be filled with signs. I understand, avoiding confusion, and it's important. I just don't know that really.
Well,
I didn't mean a stand-up sign. I meant like on the, and I always forget,
on the parking
curb.
bumper or something.
Yeah, on the, right, exactly. On the bumper, have something that says this spot is allocated to this number. I don't want anything standing up.
No, right. Okay. I mean, as long as we don't have all these like signs standing up. All over.
Yeah. Signville.
Right.
Let me say this. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. I
Well-
just don't believe in towing and booting. I'm not a big fan of the towing and booting. I understand what Isaac's saying, but the difference is this is our first one in which it's sort of like a mixed use because they're right next to us. And I don't want there to be this idea that, I'm just not a big fan. You want to give them a ticket? Give them a ticket. You got to give them another ticket. After a while, that becomes very painful to somebody. But I'm not a big fan of towing and booting.
So do we want to make a motion then that those
Yeah.
spaces need to have something on the bumper and that we will not allow towing and booting?
Kelly
I have
wanted
an
to talk.
inquiry.
Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
I have
okay.
a few questions. Few questions, you ready?
Yeah,
Yep.
sure.
Okay, so first of all, has the Block 11 committee discussed this and do they want to bring us recommendations like another committee?
Are we allowed to do that?
No, I mean, the committee met to discuss a proposal by another one of the property owners, Dr. Whittles, with respect to, because he doesn't have a lease that's enforced at the moment, with respect to his properties. And it was mentioned during the meeting that we had about this possibility of the parking being outsourced to this, private company rather than entering into another lease agreement with the town. But we didn't talk about the specifics of it. We didn't have the information. At least the committee members, I don't believe had any information about the specifics, but we're aware that there have been discussions, and I believe that Dr. Whittles has been approached as well about the possibility of privatizing his parking.
I think the base of it though, Kelly, to answer your question is when we look at the mathematics of it and the finances of it, it's not a revenue generating, we're not in a net profit off of this. So it became more for me of a question of, do we want to have the spots just to have the spots available versus potentially someone pulling them off and using them exclusively for their building? Because we're not as a town making money off of it.
And Kelly, the difference here is that the code specifically requests town council approval. And that's why it's here. Otherwise, it would have been just processed by the clerk as a regular BTR.
Okay, well, my opinion is about this, and of course, I'm not a big fan of towing and booting, but I understand, the need for it. If it's known that you don't do it, somebody might just want to park there and pay the $30 or whatever. So I understand that, but I think unlike other places, this is blended in with other like-looking parking. So we want to be consistent. We don't want to have every 10 spaces managed in a different way. It's very unfriendly, especially to visitors who, aren't used to it, not the employees. So I would try to standardize it going forward. This might be the first one, so we might look at this to be kind of a model. I don't know if it's possible that we can do some kind of a trial period and conditionally approve this to see how it works out and then meet back again Mr. Little might also, if we, for example, have a condition, no booting or towing, that, he might want to come back to us and say, well, that's not working. People are disregarding the signs. So I like the idea of each sign, each spot being properly identified, but Bob makes a good point, that we don't want to overdo it. And, that can be ugly as well. And we already have, a very strict sign code. So, that's what I would look to solve this with some kind of a consistency issue and not be too heavy-handed with the towing and booting. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have an inquiry related to that. Does the town currently have any sort of towing or booting contract with any parking enforcement companies?
No.
No.
So there's no towing or booting anywhere within the town. You simply issue tickets for overtime parking in your spaces?
Private
Correct.
companies have their own contracts, the condos and stuff with the towing companies. The town does not have a specific.
Right, but those are directly from the landlords. Those are not for charging.
Yeah.
They're not charging for the
Yeah,
parking.
yeah, I agree. I think that's a different circumstance. And, like I said initially, our goal is essentially to come in and fill that same void that's been left by the town because, as was mentioned by the council, you're essentially pulling out of that, not renewing these leases. And because it hasn't been profitable for you, we can make it profitable. We've proven an ability to do that elsewhere historically. So that's what we'd like to come in and do here with the property owners that we've contracted with in the town.
Well, let me just say this. I mean, I think Kelly was going down the same line that I was, which is, I think a conditional approval right now. We don't do a temporary, but do a conditional approval. It's conditioned upon no towing, no booting. If you find later on that there's an issue with regard to enforcement and that people are taking advantage of it, you can always come back to us.
Yeah, I agree with that.
We'd
I
be
think that's
open to it.
reasonable.
But at this point, I just would want those conditions.
I
Yeah.
agree with Josh.
We have no problem with that.
I have a question for the council since Mr. Little just alluded to multiple people that he's contacted. However, this is an application for one specific property owner. So if he does have a contract with another property owner, would the council be comfortable with the clerk handling the application directly without coming to you in the same manner, or would you want her to come back?
With the same condition, no towing?
No towing, no booting.
Yep. With the ability for them to come back, and they can always, individually ask for it if we find there's a problem. But for right now, yeah, same, just be consistent.
Okay,
Right.
so that Mr. Little have to, if you do have another client on that block that wishes to do the same thing, you would have to do a separate application, and
Right.
they would be able to process it.
But it has to be clearly marked. We don't want to be, we don't want this to be, like I said, with Miami Beach, where the signs look just like the municipal ones and you don't know where you're parking. It's got to be clearly marked.
Of
And
course. So
what
it's
is
gonna be-
Dr. Whittles doing, since that was really what you?
Widows did not want to do this. Dr. Widows wanted to, and Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, he wanted to sign the lease for another year without he was asking for more money. He wanted to go back to the same conditions and just extend it for 1 year.
And why aren't we
Right.
doing that?
Well, it came before the committee, Stephanie. And
Okay.
the committee voted against that. I'm not really sure why personally. I mean, I understand that the committee members wanted additional information.
Mhm.
But, Dr. Whittles basically said, he had talked about it have an increase before the pandemic started, but, there's been very little parking out there over the last several months. And he just does not like being in the position where there was no agreement at all. And the town, people are parking out there, and I guess money is being collected, and he's not being paid anything, and we just don't have an agreement.
Well, I
So I think that, from his standpoint, and I'm just relating what he told me, was that he would just like to have an agreement, and he is aware of the committee's concerns about the revenue issues and so forth, and wishing to have additional information, but in the interim between now and the time that it would renew again in April, I think it would be April, right, Marlene?
Yeah.
He was hopeful that we could just continue, along under the same terms and conditions as we have for the last, 10 years or so, and work towards some different type of understanding if that's what the council wishes to do.
I think that's what we,
The next term.
Well, hold on, but there's more to it than that, and I'm not going to get into all the specifics of it. Unfortunately, when we met in February or March, the committee had asked for multiple pieces of information.
Correct.
That
Correct.
the meeting was recalled and none of that information was provided to us. So we asked for the meeting to be recalled and for all of the information that we asked for in February or March, I don't remember when it was, to actually provide that we could make a decision. So it's not a failure to make a decision. It's that we didn't receive the list of items that we had requested. So we're waiting for that to be able to make an informed decision on behalf of the constituency.
No, and I understand that, Elizabeth, but my recollection, and you'll all, Jordan, Elizabeth, Marlene, you can correct me if my recollection is faulty. When we met in February and asked for that additional information, including a legal opinion, there was an issue of whether we would agree to the doctor's request to increase the amount of rent and so forth. And so that's why some of the information was requested, and it's information which we should have in any event. But when we came back to the last meeting, he had withdrawn at that point the request for additional compensation, and just wanted to go forward, for the rest of the year, knowing that we need additional information and knowing that we wouldn't consider any additional change in terms without that information, without having an understanding of certain legal rights.
Right, and the concern was that we didn't have enough, because the Block 11 committee had not met in many years, I felt, and Jordan, you tell me if you felt the same way or not, I felt that in order for me to vote on a contract, I needed to have a full understanding of what the contract terms were and what our options associated with it were. And that's really where all of that came from. And again, I think if we had had the information that we had requested, we probably could have put it to bed at that point.
Yeah, but we waited, but it took a half a year to have the second meeting. That's kind of a problem. And I understand of COVID, but you show up 6 months later to have the other meeting with not even a copy of the current contract. Here, approve it. Don't look surprised it didn't get approved.
But in the meantime, I understand all that, but in the meantime, we have people parking in a parking spot with a landlord who doesn't have a contract, who whatever little bit of money is coming in is sitting there without a contract.
Well, we had agreed that we want to, at minimum, we'll pay him what we've utilized for per the contract. What we didn't want to do was sign a contract for a year, put everyone in bed for an entire year if it was not going to be the right situation for the town. So I think we kind of agreed that at minimum we would prorate it. The question became, could we prorate it?
Well, how about this? Can we just do from now to April, and in the meantime, the committee look to see what it is beneficial for the town. But in the meantime, we're without a contract, and he's without his revenue after being 10 years with us. That's not good business practice.
I think we're going to get this resolved.
And it's not now from April. It's from when the contract last expired. So
yeah, this is going to get resolved pretty soon. I'm pretty confident. I talked to Marlene about it. Yeah, I think this is going to get resolved a lot sooner than later. I don't think this is going to last much longer.
Well, may I suggest that in the next week or so that you guys get the information that you need and that we move along, because the contract is from April to April, and we're almost there. I mean,
I'll tell the manager and the finance director. That's where we need the information from. It's not a lack of the council. So
no, I understand that. I'm just saying, Marlene, can you please give them the information that they need and or get the information that they need and set up a meeting, and let's get this done, because it's really not fair to anybody, including Dr. Whittles.
Absolutely. Let me ask you a question. So the understanding is that that this contractor will have the decal on every space. Is that correct? I wasn't sure.
And the bumper, on the bumper.
So on the bumper, it's going to have the little square. It says, call this code or whatever.
Yeah, they're
Correct,
gonna,
that we're not towing or booting. And I think that that's the motion as it's set right now, which I
I think we can
I'm
leave
happy
it to
to
staff
vote.
to figure out the mechanics of the little signs and whatever is going to be the bumpers.
And when it says conditional approval, can we have this come back next year and have it as a 1-year conditional to see how it goes? I think it goes both ways.
Doesn't matter. He can just, it's on their own. They can do whenever they want. They can come back.
No, I
There's no-
mean for us to approve it, because since this is the first time, what if this doesn't work? We should be able to have this come back next year, and if it works out fine, then we can approve it
Well,
perpetually.
why make them come back? If it works out and we don't hear anything back, then we know it's fine.
But if it doesn't work out,
then
you
he'll
have
come back.
recourse.
well,
Yeah, it comes back.
let's leave it up to the town manager, because we're letting her do the other ones in addition. So let's do it as, for a year with an automatic renew, unless the town manager feels that there's something wrong and then needs to bring it back to council.
Hey, let me just clarify that this is being processed as a business tax receipt. Business tax receipt runs from September 30th to October 1st. If we issue the license now, it'll be if they start right away, for the remainder of September, and then the new license would be October 1st to September 30th of next year.
Okay, so when are they planning on starting?
So
Can
it
they
would take
start-
time. It would take time to have signs manufactured, set up new location code, and then have everything installed so that we can begin. What you're suggesting essentially tracks the term language that's set out by our contract with the property owner. So I think the most efficient and effective thing would be to simply approve the contract in precisely that way. It's guaranteed for that 1-year term, and then it's set to auto renew unless there is some objection or notice of intent not to renew that's received before then.
I'd like for it to come back next year before there's a renewal.
Okay, we can do that, and then after that we can make it where it's automatic, if that's what you like, Jordan. Is that what you prefer?
Yeah, just because I hope it works out great, but in case it doesn't, at least we have a council that have the recourse to go back and say, you know what, this is just not working. Otherwise, you've just approved it and you're done. Game over. You have no choice.
So would you like
So
to make
let's
that?
have it come back 1 year.
Would you like to make the
Yeah,
motion?
I'll make that motion.
Make the whole motion, Jordan, with the no towing.
Approve the agreement, no towing and no booting. They have to be in some sign or indication on every single spot. And also that this is for 1 year and it has to come back before, would it be October of next year, 2021.
So we do have a problem with putting a sign on every space. For one, it would be prohibitively costly. Additionally, there are not bumpers at the end of these spaces, as was suggested by a couple of council members. So there's no place to put a small decal, as was suggested. It's just not possible. It's exactly the same setup.
Can you get bumpers? Can you buy
No.
bumpers?
No, that's not something that we could do. We don't make, material improvements to the properties. It's not our property. We
don't know.
simply provide a service.
Figure it out.
So as I mentioned to Mr. Fuller when he first raised the concern about people potentially registering for parking with the wrong location code, what we would do with these 11 spaces is have signage at a parking sign height, which would be directly in front of either of the spaces on either end cap. And then
Sorry, Mr. Little, I can't vote for that.
at those intermediate
Mr.
spaces.
Little, you're not hearing what the council is saying, that we will not vote for that. You will need to figure out with the landlord whether the landlord wants to put the bumpers on there. These are the conditions in which we are agreeing to the contract, and you're not hearing what we're saying to you. So please try
I
to
hear what you're saying.
understand. Okay,
Um,
and that's something that you will have to work out with the landlord. I know they sell bumpers because I have bought them
I
myself.
have a question.
Sure.
So I have a question. Does the town currently have that sort of signage on all of their parking spaces?
No, but what I had said was that I think we are going to have to wind up considering that based upon this coming forward.
So putting concrete blocks at the end of every town parking space?
A fair
No,
number.
just to
of
be able to
already
put a
have it
sign
there.
on, in other words, if you indicate on the bumper, the idea with the bumper, so that we don't have signs everywhere, you can indicate on the bumper that this is part of your 11 spots. That's why.
Right, and a fair number of our spots, if not all of them, in that alleyway have bumpers.
No,
When you
what they
guys
have
say
is-
bumpers, do you mean the curbstone on the ground?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Concrete.
Is that the
most
real
of
name,
them-
Kelly?
What most of them actually have is a cylinder in the center of the parking space that comes up a couple of feet. It's not a
All right,
concrete.
I'm going to stop you there. I
Whatever
really
it is
don't
I'm
wanna
always
get
hitting, you need to put them there.
Right.
Stephanie,
Okay.
Stephanie,
I
can
don't
I,
want
can I,
to.
can I interrupt you a minute, Stephanie? I need to leave
Absolutely.
in about 12 minutes. So I would like to get to the contract for the manager.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
I
So
think we're
these
clear
are
on
Otherwise,
the-
I'm not going to be here. So if you want to resume
Okay.
with this item
That's
afterwards.
fine. No.
I
Bob, you're
think it's
correct. I think we've spent enough time on it. Jordan, make your motion and then we will move on to the next.
Yeah,
Make it
I made the
10.
motion, so.
I second it.
Okay. All those in favor?
Wait, wait.
Mayor, we do have somebody that wanted to speak on the item,
Well, I can't. Who is that?
Mrs. Newhut.
Ms.
And there's
Newhut,
another one,
There's
Teddy.
another person that has his hand raised.
Yeah,
And
she
another-
has a right. She has a right to.
Well,
She has a right.
can we
You have
just-
2 minutes, Ms. Newhut. Ms. Newhut, state your name and address for the record, please.
And then Stephanie, there's another person too.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Teddy.
Okay.
My name is Frances Newhut, and again, I'm at 1060 Kane Concourse. First of all, the parking spaces that he is talking about have very few. In other words, they have a school there that's non-conforming. They have a Fred Astaire dance studio that's mostly empty. She has 2 vacancies, and 2 vacancies. What I'm trying to say is that parking lot has a lot of businesses. And for years, they've been talking about putting a garage there for these restaurants and for your fiduciary obligation. And why I say this is your fiduciary obligation, and this is really delaying the solution, is because you, as a council, have eliminated our parking trust by not having these people have to pay upfront. Our parking garage, you keep saying, is not full. Hello. But meanwhile, you gave Church by the Sea over 100 parking spaces off street. You've given 1177 Kane Concourse hundreds of parking spaces off the street. You've given the both hotels extra parking off street. I think that you have full, and also we have a school that has an expanded school there, and I don't know where they're going to park. But more importantly, and I will quote Bruder, and this is not a good business deal. And the reason why is because you are going to put more businesses out of business. We are facing a coronavirus. Most of our tenants are restaurants, and they are not even making it. I have reduced their rent, and there's nothing more I can do. You put this parking and the customers are getting tickets, you are out of your minds. You will lose more business, just like you did King Jewelers many years ago by ticketing him constantly. You are destroying our business district, and it is getting worse. And we have a coronavirus to prove it, because now it's really bad. You are basically not doing your job. You are destroying our business district and our town. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have one more person. Teddy?
Oh.
Okay, no?
Hold on. I'm trying to. Okay, Teddy.
Please
You
say
need
your
to
name
unmute yourself.
and address for the record.
You need to unmute yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name's Teddy Schul. I'm the owner of Smart Park LLC. I just wanted to reassure you guys that there are concrete poles that are vertical on each and every one of those spots. And above that, on the top end of those is a metal pipe. We can affix a sign to every single one of those spots that are just vertical that will stay within that concrete pole. Therefore, like every single person who parks in every single spot will see that thing when they first pull in. So there cannot
Perfect.
be any confusion going forward.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay. Marlene, Alba, we have a motion and a
Yes.
second.
We do.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, let's move on to item number 2, and Bob goes first because he has to go.
Approval of a resolution appointing Ms. Maria Laste as the town of Bay Harbor Island town manager and approving an employment agreement between the town and Ms. Laste.
Okay, Bob, the floor is yours.
Bob, you're muted.
Sorry. I looking for the contract, which I have on my computer. I'm in favor of the contract. I'm in favor of, proceeding with Maria Lasday. I just had a couple of questions about the contract. And if I could find it here we go. So just in general terms, I discussed some of this with Marlene the other day. I just want to make sure that a couple of issues, and maybe this is in the employee handbook, I'm not aware of it. Computers and phones issued by the town, the manager, or anybody else must be, when they are returned by that person, in an unaltered condition. In other words, the information needs to be there. And I want to make sure that that is in the contract, or if it's not, it's in the employee manual and incorporated into the contract. And I also want to make sure that the contract specifically provides, even if it's already in the employment manual, that with limited exceptions, vacation time is use it or lose it. We're not going to be accumulating, weeks and weeks and weeks of vacation time and sick time, so that upon the termination, an individual gets $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 worth of time, as has apparently happened recently. So I just want to make sure that those provisions are very clear. Otherwise, it appears to be a fairly standard contract that we have used in the past with prior managers.
So I want to let you know that we went to the handbook to look to see, and it is consistent with our handbook, the vacation time, right, Marlene, and the rollover, and how many days exactly can you from now on roll over, so that we wouldn't have that issue again. Isn't that correct, Marlene?
Yes, you can roll over up to 8 days, but you have to use it on the following year.
Correct.
So no more accumulating, 100 days or whatever it was that some people are.
And what about turning in phones and computers? I mean, there needs to be some type of consequence or something if somebody, thinks it's in their best interest to violate our policies.
It's actually in the manual. However, we've obviously had an issue with that in the past, but the new policies contain information that it is town property, and the emails and the text and everything that's within the work phone and the work computer are the property of the town.
But what happens if they turn it in, and if they don't turn it in with all that information? Is there a consequences in the handbook or in a contract that says that if you don't turn it in, these are the consequences?
Well, I think that the town attorney can help me out on this. The issue becomes that then they're no longer employees, and then Josh, you're trying to say something.
Yeah, before Frank goes in, here's one thing that's good about the way this contract is set up. it states that it's based upon the policy and procedure manual, the employee manual that's there at the time. What we need to do as a council is go in and go over and redo the policy, procedure, and employee manual. That will lock in whatever our policies are, how we set up different things, including payment as far as vacation days, how it goes as far as any payment of any sort if you don't turn in your materials at the end of your employment. We need to restructure that. This contract binds that person to that new manual.
So let's.
The money is just done. Frank, please. I don't hear you.
Yeah, if I may, while this looks very similar to the prior contracts, we spent 2 days going through it and reworking it to make sure that it was not confusing, not inconsistent, and completely and totally consistent with our present and future employee manuals. To answer your question, as Marlene pointed out, the vacation time is use it or lose it, as set forth in the employee manual. And secondly, with regard to the employee manual, and it's on page, I believe, 146, that if equipment isn't brought back in the manner that it should be, it's deducted from one's salary, and the expenses can be deducted. So here we have up to 12 weeks of severance pay, and certainly if we get an empty computer in addition to a release, we do have that ability. I can't imagine
that doesn't address it, Frank, because here's the thing. That's why we have to redo the manual. What you just said there is that if somebody doesn't return something, it gets deducted. But if we give them a phone and 3 years later they hand us back a phone, the value of that phone might be $100. I'd rather have the documents that are attached to the phone.
No, it's the condition. It's the condition of the property. So say, for example, I would read that, and if given the task, I would revise it. I can tell you for our companies, we have in our employee manual something similar, but an additional kicker, that if we have any expenses related thereto, we have the right to charge and indemnify against that. For example, we had an entire lawsuit for someone who took a competitor's information with her and loaded it onto our server. So, and we got sued, and she ended up paying it. I mean, she's been paying it like $1,600 a month for the past 8 years. So, I'm happy to incorporate that as well. But there is some language it could be better in the handbook.
Right, in the manual, we have to deal with that.
I also would like to put out there. I would also just like to put out there that, I think one of the things that I'm personally going to be looking for is enforcement of that, because we've had some great policies in the past, and when we go to look at whether or not we've actually followed them, we haven't. So, I'm glad that we're doing the upfront work, but I need to really push and say we need to do the back end work too.
Well, Elizabeth, on that, let me just say on that, one of the problems with the current policy procedure manual is that if there's any problem, it's essentially done and reviewed by the manager. It doesn't talk about if the problem is the manager.
No,
so
yeah.
we're going to have to revise it.
Well, that's why I'm saying I'm glad we're cleaning some of the front end stuff up, but we need to then have that beautiful follow through in the back end.
Right.
So I think what we need to do, and this will be added to the list of things to do, is go, and I think, Marlene, you need to give everybody a hard copy again of the manuals. And then I think we need to have a meeting with whether it's with the new town manager and go through it, see what we like, see what we don't, see what she likes, see what she doesn't, and then review the whole thing all over again. That's my suggestion.
A couple of things that I would be remiss if I didn't mention. One thing is this manual was extensively reviewed by our employment attorney or our labor attorney for compliance. So whatever meeting we're going to have, we need to make sure that he's included. But for any changes. And number two is there is software available, which we are looking into, that will back up all phones with text in the future. So even if people try to damage it, erase it, we will have the backup. And also any computers will be on our server, and the server does backups as well. So there are some things that we're putting in place as we speak because of things that have happened recently that will catch some of those problems.
So Marlene, I understand that we had our attorney there, but I think the council I think needs to go through it. There are things in there over the last couple months that I've learned that I don't think the whole council is aware of in detail. And I think that we just need to go through it one more time.
Well, I understand.
I understand.
I understand that perfectly. I know that.
No, I don't have a problem.
That you might want to tweak something.
You know what I'm
You need
talking
to have
about.
the attorney on board to make sure that it is.
Yes.
Okay, that's for the future. Let's focus on this contract.
Right.
I maybe want to change the dip day to maybe have her start on the 29th instead of, and let her, slowly moving forward. I think Marlene has been under a tremendous amount of pressure and stress. And I think that having her start a little earlier would also help both of them.
So do you want to do it on or before pending, background checks and execution of the contract and all legal documents?
Yes. If that's okay.
The
I have
problem
one
is she's
question.
on vacation, so she might not be able to get to but we can speak to her.
Yeah, we can at least have the language in there.
Right. That would be great.
I have a question. I could have sworn in JC's agreement and maybe even in Ron's, there's a probationary period, but there's not in this agreement. Was there any discussion in regards to that?
There was no probationary period in either one of those contracts at all.
In JC's, there was no probationary period?
There was not. Not in Ron's either. I mean, I basically went through, I spent way more time than probably I anticipated on this, but I wanted to make sure it was as good as could possibly be done for you. This is somewhat similar, but very different from those two contracts that you referenced.
Yeah, well, I noticed some of the changes in 12C, to say the least, but thanks.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions and concerns before we vote on this?
I find it acceptable, even better with your suggestions, and I'm very glad that we're sticking to a 5-day week. No 4-day work week unless, they want to use a vacation day here and there.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. So roll call, I guess, Alba, to ratify the agreement.
Do we have a motion? I don't have a motion on the table.
I'll move it.
I'll second it.
Okay. With the understanding that if she can start earlier and she gets everything done, Elizabeth, that she will start earlier.
Great.
Yes.
Agreed.
Okay. All right, Alba.
You want me to, okay, the Councilmember Yaffe,
Or
Councilmember Tricoche. I guess she's on mute. Councilmember Salver,
4.
Councilmember Reed,
4.
Councilmember Leonard,
4.
Vice Mayor Fuller,
4.
Mayor Bruder.
4.
It passes.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. Bye,
night.
everybody. Good night.
Right.